to get into screen printing today, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how to select screens, what screens are, parts of the screen, importantly, how to prepare the screens. Okay? As far as your artwork is concerned, your artwork that you create for the screen printing, the artwork needs to be turned into 100% black and white. So whatever you design needs to be turned into 100% black and white. It then needs to be printed on this clear transparency material. Sometimes they're called just plain transparencies, sometimes they're called acetates. We print them on our HP laser printer over here, and there's a drawer that say acetate transparencies there. That's where we find them, that's where we print them. Okay, so just because you identify your artwork as black and white does not mean that you need to print with black ink. Different than your experience last year with the offset printing press, we can change. I got tons of colors for screen printing. Tons of colors we can mix, tons of colors that we can do our screen printing with. You just need to turn it to black and white based on what we're going to do moving forward with the preparation of the screen. Okay, so screen printing is an old method of printing for things that we can't push through a printing press. Things like t-shirts, things like glass, things like metal. So these are a couple of examples of screens. If you took a magnifying glass and you looked at the screen material itself, it's a mesh fabric, like a net. They would look like little tiny little squares, like a very fine net. Long ago, this was called silk screen printing. Actually, the fabric was made of silk. It's not the case anymore. It's like a polyester fabric. This will allow ink and material to pass through. Okay, it's just like a screen in your windows at home. They come in all different shapes and sizes, the screens. You see some examples right here. Where we want to get to is here. This green material is a film material called emulsion. Emulsion. We're going to talk about that in a little bit when we actually handle the material and place it on the screen itself. Okay? What you're going to do with the film, though, is basically burn your design into the film with ultraviolet light. But before we do any of that, we have to choose a screen, we have to prepare the screen, and put the emulsion on the screen. What you want to do when you select a screen, you want to make sure that the screen has got some decent tension on it. It needs to be nice and tight. If it's really loose, it's going to give you really terrible looking prints. So you want to have the screen nice and tight. You want to hold it up to the light and make sure that there's nothing blocking those little squares of mesh fabric. Nothing that would stop the ink from passing through. So this one's a pretty decent screen. Once again, they come in all different shapes and sizes. This one is made of aluminum, and I have a pile of these for you advanced students. These are awesome, really good. A friend of mine stopped his screen printing business and he donated them to the program. And these are awesome, although covered with ink. Okay, so once you've selected your screen, we need to prepare it. So we're going to take a walk back here to the white sink. Turn on the hot water before using the power washer. Carolyn can probably attest to the fact that she's heard me scream, "Turn on the water!" across the shop many times. You need to turn the water on first. If you don't, you're going to burn out the engine on the power washer. Okay, so we're going to turn on the water, and the type of water we're using is hot water. We use hot water in this process. Okay, our power washer, we turn on our power washer. It's got 2 switches on it. We just turn them clockwise. Now it's ready to go. You remember from shop safety and intro, we never ever point the power washer at anything outside of the white sink. Never outside of the white sink. Power washers are deceptively dangerous. People buy them for home and they try to clean their decks and they end up ruining their decks. You see that I'm wearing all the safety equipment, the gloves, the apron, and the goggles. To use the power washer, you're going to blast away by pulling the trigger, and that will turn on the power washer. Okay, this white sink is specifically set up for screen printing. We're going to step on a foot pedal here, and what this does is it backlights the sink so we can see what we're doing. The first step in preparing the screen is to blast the screen with water. The screen has got two parts. The print side of the screen, which is flat, and the ink side of the screen, which has got, like, you know, the frame pushing outward. Ink side, print side. Ink side, print side. We're gonna blast both sides. Get any bits of tape, any bits of ink, any old emulsion, we're going to blast it all off of there. All right, cool. Now, we're going to use a chemical called degreaser. Degreaser, what it does is it chemically treats the screen, cleans it, but chemically treats it so we can make the emulsion stick to it. Real important part of the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray both sides, the print side and the ink side. And then we're going to take this really nasty, coarse scrub brush, and we are going to scrub the entire print side of the screen, and the ink side of the screen. Now, everyone's a little bit, I can't tell you how much to scrub or how long to scrub. Everyone's a little stronger, a little weaker than each other. You got to give it a good workout, okay? That's all I can say. If you spray it on there and you just go, I'm done, it's not going to work. The film won't stick, okay? The film won't stick. So you got to give it a decent workout. Now, once you've scrubbed both sides of the degreaser, you're going to power wash it again. You got to get all the excess chemical. The chemical is penetrating into the fabric. You want to get the excess off. Both sides. Now, with the screen soaking wet, you're going to walk over back to the work table. The emulsion is a light-sensitive bit of material, film. It reacts to light. It reacts to light. But it reacts to light very slowly. It reacts to ultraviolet light rather quickly. What this means is we can work with the material in the regular shop light, but we can't wait too long, okay? So we don't have to like fall all over ourselves, but we need to, once we do what we need to do, to put it back into the dark container. Okay. Comes out of its can. Okay, this is the emulsion. It's got two sides or parts. The dull side is the actual emulsion or gel. It's a light sensitive gel. The shiny side is the base. Emulsion, base. Emulsion dull, base shiny. Emulsion dull, base shiny. We are going to cut a piece of emulsion a couple of inches bigger than your design. A couple of inches bigger than your design. And now, because this is sensitive to light, we're going to wrap it back up. Put it back in the bag. Back in the pan. Close it up. Okay. What we're going to do is we are going to put the dull side down on the print side of the screen. Dull side down on the print side of the screen. This is like a fruit roll-up. Remember eating a fruit roll-up? Bella, right? One side's the fruit, one side's a piece that you throw away. This is kind of like that. The emulsion is the light sensitive gel. The base is the part that you would throw away. We're going to lay this down, dull side down, on the screen itself. You have to do this in a very particular way. You have to have good hands for this project. So I'm practicing on dry land here, not near the water. I'm using my fingertips, and I'm letting the film break down. Just like this. Because we don't want to trap any air bubbles under there. We don't want the film all kinked up. Once I'm comfortable with the screen soaking wet, I'm going to position the emulsion dull side down and just let it drape down onto frame. Okay. I'm going to hold it up to the light. I'm going to look for any air bubbles. If I have any air bubbles, I can take regular water, give it a little bit of a spritz. Just a spritz. Gently take a shot grab, gently, from the center out. You want to get rid of any bubbles that would remain. Okay, hold it to the light. We're awesome. We're good. What's going to happen, that emulsion is going to seep down into the mesh fabric. The chemistry, the degreaser is allowing that to happen. Some physics is going to allow that to happen. And that film, that gel, is going to penetrate into the little cells of the screen. Okay? You're going to put some tape on this, put your name on it. We need to let this cure in the dark for 24 hours. We do this right here. Dark cabinet. Keep it in there for 24 hours. Like a cooking show, I got one ready. If you've done this right, in 24 hours, you'll peel away the base, throw it away. And then we will go to screen printing part 2.
Okay, GraphCom kids, here's what we're going to do next for our screen printing adventures. We have prepared our screen, we have put our emulsion on the screen, we've let it cure for 24 hours in the dark, and we are ready to burn in our design. So after it's been in the dark and cured for 24 hours, we will carefully peel away the base. We're going to take our positive of our design, our acetate positive, and position it on top of the emulsion. We are going to use the UV exposure system to expose this material with high concentrations of ultraviolet light. Before we do that, we're going to carefully take a piece of tempered glass, place it on top of our screen. So we have a sandwich made here. We have the screen on the bottom, the positive in between, a piece of glass on top. And we're just going to rest that inside the machine. We're going to close the curtains that will prevent the ultraviolet light from getting everywhere in the shop. And we're going to turn on the red button to turn on the power. This should be preset to 2.0, and we are going to expose this for 1 minute by pressing the blue start button. At the end of the exposure time, we're going to shut the machine off. Always check with your instructor about what the exposure time should be. Now, if you take a very close look at this, we have what I'm calling a latent image. It's been exposed, but it's not completely developed. If you look very, very close, you can see kind of the outline of some of the shapes of my design. Now we need to go develop this screen. So we're going to leave behind our positive, and we are going to walk over through the shop to our washout sink. We're going to step on the bulb, and that backlights our washout sink. We're going to place the screen inside the washout sink. We're always going to use hot water for screen printing processes, so we're going to turn on the hot water. We're not going to use the power washer for this part of the trip. We're going to use our hose, and we're going to So there you see that the design has been developed, the stencil has been created just the way we want it to be, okay? All of the areas of white will allow the ink to pass through. All of the area in green will stop ink from passing through. So we just want to double check, make sure we have no bits of emulsion lying behind. Because we want our design to print true to our original. The next step would be to mask off all of the areas of the screen that we don't want the ink to pass through. The next step would be to mask the screen. We've exposed it, we've developed it, we have our stencil made. Looks like a nice, cool tribal squid. But now what we need to do is we need to mask off all of the areas of the screen that we do not want the ink to pass through. So we've got some materials here. We have some special masking tape. We have a pan of water. We have some scissors, shop rag, and we have screen filler. We have some screen filler. That's a pretty cool product. Help us fill up any holes that develop when we're doing the masking. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to cut a section of masking tape. You've got paper on one side and gluey paper on the other side. We're going to submerge the whole piece of tape in the water pan, and then we're just going to cover all of the areas of the screen that we don't want the ink to pass through. This will dry. Now, where we've got nice thick emulsion, nice solid emulsion, that green film, that's going to hold back the ink from passing through. So we do not need to tape those areas. Actually, we don't want the tape real close to our design. That will compromise the quality of your prints when you start laying the ink down. So what I mean by this, if you have solid emulsion right leading up to the edges of your design, do not put the tape too close to your stencil. Right here is fine. Got plenty of solid emulsion there that will hold the ink back. We'll just continue the process until all of the areas of open screen have been masked off. It's really important to get all of the open spaces because you don't want to have ink printing where you don't need it, especially when you're doing t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies and things like that. And I think we have most of the area masked off. Hold it up to the light and make sure the only thing you see is the open parts of the stencil. Any weak sections, that looks a little weak, so I may mask that off a little bit. But otherwise, we're in pretty good shape. I'm going to put another piece of tape here, just to make sure. It doesn't take that long to do this, and better safe than sorry. Here I'm coming around the edges of the frame itself. Just along that one area, looked a little suspect. And again, to avoid any ink leaks, we're just going to cover that over. Now, with our shop rag, again, it takes good hands for this process of screen printing. We're just going to gently take the shop rag and make sure that that tape is nice and flush to the frame so it dries nice and flat, and we're good to go. So now this screen is completely masked, nicely masked. If you had any little tiny holes in the detailed part of your stencil, or even out here, out in your emulsion, that's where you would use the screen filler with a paintbrush to fill up any of those holes. We let this dry. Now that it's all masked, we are ready to print. GraphCom kids, we're to the fun part now. We're going to actually begin to print today. Some tools and materials you're going to need to screen print. This tool here is called a squeegee. It's got a wooden handle. It's got a rubber, what they call a blade. It's flexible. And this is what you're going to use to push the ink through your stencil, to flood your stencil on your screen printing screen and push it through onto your fabric or whatever. This is a spatula or ink knife, and it's always good to have a rag handy, shop rag handy, because it's a bit of a messy process sometimes. So this is a multicolor screen printing press. It's got 4 places for mounting screens to do multiple color screen printing work. Today we're going to demonstrate just single color screen printing, so we're only going to be using one of the platens and one of the print heads. This is the print head, and you loosen and tighten the clamp on the print head by turning these knobs. Now, we also have single color screen printing presses, essentially. Here, that it's tabletop model, and you can see that the screen is mounted. The clamps are a lot less sophisticated, and it's being kind of held up with a squeegee. Okay, so we have our screens here. They've been masked up. Little holes have been patched if we had any. We've got 2 of them to demonstrate with. Again, screens come in different shapes and sizes. The part that is right here is called the ink side of the screen. The flat part is called the print side of the screen, but we've talked about that already. What we're going to do is we're going to put the screen into the clamp, visually center it, and then we're going to tighten the clamp up. Now, for this screen is really tough. It's got big wooden stable frame, and the way you can push the screen down is simply by standing in front of the platen and pressing it down. I'm just going to spin the carousel to take a look at another station just to make a point. These screens are kind of older. This one's in decent shape, but they're very fragile. So if we're using this particular machine, we clamp it in the same way. However, this is a heavy-duty machine with a wimpy frame. So when we have these frames and we're using these more fragile frames, the way we're going to push the screen down is by grabbing the head of the print head, not the screen itself. We're just going to guide it down with one hand, and now we're ready to go. And we're going to bring it back up so that your force is on the print head and not the screen. In this case here, which is how you're going to be working a lot of the time, you can just apply pressure to the screen itself. These thicker screens, if you will, can handle the pressure. Okay, a word about the ink that we're going to be using. We are going to be using fabric ink, textile ink. The product is designed to permanently stain or ink your clothes. So you want to be very careful, wear an apron, or be just very, very careful not to get it on your clothes. It's water-based, so you can get it on your hands, and you can wash your hands after the process, but you want to try to work as neat as possible. So we're going to just open up our ink, and there it is, nice green. I'm going to take my ink knife, and I'm going to stir the ink up. We want to make it nice and viscous, basically real smooth and soupy, because considering what we're doing here, guys, we are pushing, essentially flooding our stencil and then pushing it through these little mesh fabrics that we talked about onto your t-shirt or whatever you're printing upon. So we give this a nice stir. and we're going to give this a nice bead of ink right along the top. Okay, that'll do. You want to be really careful where you place this. You don't want it to be like hanging out on the edge of the platen where it could fall and hit the ground. You don't want to put it, you know, where people are going to knock it over. So make sure you put it somewhere safe where no one's going to touch it. For now, I'm just going to put it right here, because when this stuff hits the ground, it's like a bomb of ink, and we don't want to have that happening. So we put that in a safe place where we can get to it, but where it won't be knocked down easily. Okay, next, we have our ink. Our frame is ready to go. It's been firmly clamped into the print head. And now I've got some construction paper here on the platen. The platen is just basically the base of the printer where you would mount shirts to. Again, place whatever you want to have printed on top of it. With one hand, I'm going to bring down my screen. I'm going to take my squeegee, both hands, and I'm going to flood the stencil. Now, what you should see is the design visually take shape, is the way I put it. You can actually see all aspects of the design have been flooded with ink. Now, if you can do this with one pull, that's great. I can't tell you how many times you're going to need to pull it, which direction. Everyone's a little stronger, a little weaker than each other. It takes a lot of practice, some skill, and it takes routine. You have to, how much pressure, how much ink, get into a nice rhythm to give yourself repetitive, consistent prints. So I pushed and flooded my stencil. I'm going to carefully place my squeegee near the top portion of the screen. And I'm going to gently and slowly, because you can see we've got springs here, I'll raise this up. And there we have our first screen print. It looks just the way we've drawn it as a sketch. It looks the way we've refined it using Illustrator. And now we just want to put it in a safe place because it's wet, and we go on to our next print. Again, it's all about rhythm. Getting into a rhythm, a consistent rhythm, how hard to press, how much ink to use. Flooding the stencil again. Sometimes you can push back and then forward. A lot of people use a lot of different techniques. That one's looking nice. Ooh, looks nice on the black. And once again, it takes some practice, and it takes getting consistent with it. Whatever technique gives you the best results is what you want to use. That one's looking awesome. Okay. Now imagine if these were t-shirts. We'd be mounting them on the platen. In very quick time, we could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 t-shirts done, or at least printed. So that's the basics of single color screen printing. Thanks. Okay, so you've successfully screen printed, you had a great time, you made some amazing artwork, you might have made some really cool t-shirts that you and all your friends are gonna want. You made a little GraphCom history, made some cool stuff. Now it's time to clean up. Here's how we clean up for screen printing. Here we are near our famous wash sink. We have inky squeegees, inky ink knives. We need to use this sink to clean them up. We need to clean them up thoroughly using just plain water, staying inside this sink. Once they are clean and dried, they'll be put back from where we found them, in the squeegees drawer and the ink knives drawer. The ink itself, we're going to make sure that we close it so it doesn't dry out, and then we're going to return it to the flammable cabinet next to the wall of the shop. Okay, so we're gonna clean all that up. I'm not gonna bother showing you how to clean it up, but hey, do your own dishes, all right? You made the mess, you clean it up. Do not leave them in the sink. I need them cleaned, I need them dried, and I need them put away. Okay, so that's for the ink knives and the squeegees. Now, for the screen itself, if we're going to use this screen for another print run, if you said, listen, I did 5 t-shirts today, but I want to do 10 t-shirts next class, so you need to save the screen. The way we do that is we just bring it over to the sink and we just gently with the garden hose we want to wash out all of the ink so it does not dry inside the stencil. It needs to be clear before you put it away on the screen rack, which is over here, the screen rack. Here's our screen rack. So we can let them dry and the screen has lived to print another day. Now, if we are totally done, we're never going to print this design again. What we're going to do is again hit it with the garden hose. And what that will do is it'll loosen up all of the tape. And you want to strip away all of the paper masking tape. Want to get as much as we can off of there before we hit it with this special chemical that will remove the stencil. Okay, so that special chemical is right here. It is called Screen Printing Stencil Remover. It's got a red label. Red means stop, means we're done. The red label, okay? We're going to spray the stencil remover right onto the emulsion. Once again on the print side of the screen. Okay, I've got some ink up here. It's still kind of like dry. Want to get rid of it. So loosening it up a little bit with the garden hose. Then I'm going to turn on the power washer. So we are going to blast away with the power washer. The screen is said to be reclaimed. We still see a little bit of the latent image in there. We want to still blast that just a little bit more to get that out of there. But you've got to get all the tape, all the old emulsion, all the old design, all the ink and tape to make it a screen that can be reused over and over again. So that's why it's called reclaiming it. You're reclaiming it so you can use it again for another design. And that's where the backlit sink is very, very helpful. You can kind of hold it up to the light and see that the screen is clear, ready to be used next time.